Excellent. Right, let's switch views here. So. Okay, we're ready. Yeah,
Cheers.
okay. Have a look.
I need to go to the back.
I'll do it. Open it. No, open it.
But I put it on somewhere. I put it on and you said
I can't believe there's 20 people here. What's wrong with you people? Go home. I mean, what was doing? Well, then nobody would be here. Nobody else would not. Damn it. Okay, bit of housekeeping stuff to begin with. I'm going to do a video tomorrow, which I'll put on Canvas that will go over each of the essay questions with some advice about what I'd expect an answer to look like. not necessarily a plan for you because part of the assignment is for you to do a plan anyway, so I don't want to give you a plan, but I'll just give some very brief pointers of exactly what I expect the content to be for those essays, what kind of things you should draw on. So that'll go up sometime tomorrow afternoon. I'll try and get it done in the morning and upload it, and then I'll ping an announcement to everyone to say it's ready. So if you want to use that, then by all means do. Do we have any questions from anyone at this point about essays? No? Superb. The second question is this. How many of you are intending to go to seminars tomorrow? Okay. Damn it. That means I have to come to I was hoping to finish early, but no. So I will see some of you tomorrow, okay? But as far as I know, nobody's told me that seminars are not being run. So yeah, but if you have a seminar with Evelyn, is she cancelled? Yes, she has, definitely, yeah, because she's not actually in the country tomorrow, so yeah. So if you do have a seminar with Evelyn, if you have it with Chris, if Chris has made arrangements to cancel, then so be it. I will be 3 o'clock tomorrow, whatever that horrible room is in the Digital Technium building. You'll be there, right? You better damn well be there now, because if I'm staying until 3 o'clock, you're staying until 4 o'clock. Okay, the last topic to cover in MS-100 is again a topic which is very important, but it's important because it's wrong. Audience theory is covered, and just by a show of hands, I don't expect, obviously there's not many people here today, but by a show of hands, have you studied audience theory previously? There's a few people who have done this. It's a kind of it's still a staple part of media courses, both at university level and pre-university level, audience theory. What is problematic about audience theory is the assumptions that these theories make about us as human beings, first of all, and secondly, the assumptions that they make about our relationship with media, which has radically changed in the last 25 years. And most of the audience theory out there refers to a type of media which we simply don't engage with anymore. And therefore, these theories are, by and large, totally out of date at this point. They are not entirely useless, but we need to think about how to reposition them for the digital age. Some of them are completely useless and always have been. Now, the precursor to this lecture is assignment 2 that I got you to do, when you read William Merrin's chapter on the history of media studies, where he outlines very clearly that the development of the discipline itself was around audience and reception studies. The legitimacy for media studies as an academic discipline came from studies of audience itself. Hence, it's really, really important as a topic. But right from the outset, just as Will argues in his chapter, I want to argue straight away that audience theory is completely outdated. And what we really need is a new approach to understanding audiences. So this is what I want to cover today. What is an audience? Media effects and media use, encoding and decoding, study of Dallas, and the critique of audience theory, and the rise of what William calls media, as opposed to media, which we usually talk about. The importance of the hyphen here is to distinguish that media now relates to us personally, rather than this idea of a mass audience or something, where you have a huge group of people all consuming the same sort of content. We no longer have that. We might well all use the same platforms. We might well all have an Instagram account or go on YouTube or so on, but the content which we actually consume on those platforms is all individualized. We don't look at the same sort of things. We're not given the same suggestions. We're not taken down the same routes in terms of content any longer. Our individualized experience means that the concept of having a mass audience for media text now is kind of irrelevant. We still have big events that go on. On Sunday, there will be billions of people watching 90 minutes of football when Argentina and France play in the World Cup final. That's a mass audience. So they still do occur, but in the day-to-day engagement that we have with media, most of this is not in terms of a mass audience any longer. So that is really the point that I want to end on today. So, let us churn through this stuff and make sure that you understand it. So to begin, in media studies, the term audience usually refers to an assembly of listeners or viewers who come together, if only virtually, through shared consumption of film, television, radio, the internet, music, or advertising. This is a definition from 2005. The reason why I choose it as a useful one is that it does at least acknowledge the existence of this thing, the internet, which is quite important. Most audience definitions even do not encompass digital media in that way. They still talk about film, television, radio, music, advertising, as if they were pre-digital forms. And the interesting thing to me is that every one of those is digital. Nobody makes film with film any longer. It's a digital process. Editing is digital. You don't use scissors and razor blades to cut pieces of celluloid anymore. We use digital editing techniques. Broadcasting of films, if you like, the projection of film, is an entirely digital art. Projection used to be quite a technical process. You had to be highly skilled. You had to be able to handle flammable materials, etc. Now, you usually just stick a USB stick into the back of the projector. That's how films are distributed these days. And you just leave it there and press play. So be it. It's all right. Television is all digital now. There is no such thing as analog television. The analog television. Does anyone know when analog television ended in the UK? Because you can't pick it up anymore. It doesn't exist. Anyone aware? It actually ended in Wales before the States as well. Wales was ahead of everywhere else. Ended in Wales in 2010, ended in the UK in 2012. There's only digital television available in the United Kingdom any longer. And that's the same for most countries now. You do not have old-fashioned broadcast television, it is all digital. Newspapers, all produced digitally, distributed digitally. We sometimes... has anyone bought a newspaper on campus? No? There's a reason for that. They don't sell them. There's nowhere on campus that sells a newspaper any longer. The shops on campus don't stock them. I went in asking for stamps yesterday. They don't stock stamps.
They
And they
do.
don't.
They do stock stamps in Costco.
They don't have any.
They're not.
They haven't had any for weeks.
No.
I was the first person who asked, apparently. But yeah, you're right. They were looking in the tills for me to see if they had any, but said they ran out weeks ago. And then it occurred to me, there's loads of stuff you don't stock Costco, like newspapers, because they used to have them. And now they've got rid, because nobody was buying them, they were a waste of space. But a lot of people consume news on campus. I read the newspaper every day, right? It's on my phone. So everything is digital now. And the problematic aspect of that is that audience theory has struggled to find an acceptable way to talk about digital media and the experience that we have as individuals of it. So this definition of audience still hangs together. But what I want to say is that increasingly this is very rare, this kind of audience coming together. There are major events that happen. You know, back in September we had the Queen's funeral, right? You know, billions of people around the world watched the Queen's funeral. I didn't. Thought it was quite sad that the Queen died, but I'm not into that kind of thing. I'm not a royalist by any means, so I didn't actually watch it, but everyone else was watching it. It was just like, okay, knock yourselves out. I was playing Stray, I think. Had much more fun. It's a good game, man. So, these things still exist, but very, very infrequently now, compared to the past where mass audiences were the norm. Scenes like this characterised media consumption in the 20th century. What are these people doing? Watching a movie, yeah. Movies make more money now than they ever did previously. You know, all the biggest hits in the history of Hollywood have come in the 20th century, in the 21st century, I should say. But, interestingly, fewer people go. You know, this was a normal scene in any cinema anywhere across the Western world in the 40s, 50s, 60s. Since the 1960s, fewer and fewer people have gone to the cinema. This kind of mass participation to watch the same cultural content has gradually ended. Really starting in the 1970s, where you had greater diversification of experience, into the 1980s, where that boomed, in particular with new media forms in the home, such as cable television or video games. We had a greater diversity of what you could do. And into the 90s, where mass adoption of the internet meant that we all started to have individualized experiences, rather than this mass sort of, everyone consumes the same thing. By a show of hands, please, how many of you this year have gone to the cinema? Yeah, I have too, for once. Okay. How many of you, by a show of hands, please, watched Top Gun in the cinema? Only a few. It's interesting. What did you go and see?
Multiverse of Madness, Thor, and what's the other movie?
Okay, Thor. Anyone watch Thor in the cinema? A few. Multiverse of Madness. Anyone? 10 takers for this? Okay. Name me something you've gone to see.
Hard to do. I go to the cinema a lot.
Something big.
Well, Thor, I guess, as well, yeah. There was like a movie with, what's his name?
I love
George
the
Clooney.
specificity.
George Clooney.
George Clooney?
Paradise, something or other, some weird rom-com.
That doesn't sound like my cup of tea at all. Tell me something you've been to see.
I watched Batman.
Oh, Batman. Show of hands, please. You went to watch Batman. It's crazy. There's a few. But you see what's emerging out of it. Now, even when I was a kid, if you said, like, Batman, everyone would put their hand up. Because we were all kind of watching the same thing and having the same cultural experiences as one another. But even for I've been to the cinema, but even there's a segmentation of the stuff you see. Don't go and watch the same things anymore. That's interesting to me. This kind of cultural experience seems to have died out. The only film I've seen in the cinema this year was John Carpenter's The Thing, a 40-year re-release. There was 8 people in the cinema. I loved it. It was great. I could put my feet up. I could really wallow. Get some food. Fantastic. Enjoyed it. But I wouldn't actually go to watch anything made in 2022 because it's not my thing. I'm labouring over a very simple point. This kind of mass consumption no longer really exists unless there is a very, very significant cultural moment that happens. So, well, by that I mean, Sunday coming up, billions of people will watch the football on Sunday. That's a significant worldwide cultural moment for people. And everyone will, pick a team, and so on and so forth. Basically, to understand audience behaviour now, we have to take different approaches. So a lot of research has been done in the past 20 years, for example, on this phenomena, internet users in China. And what you seem to understand is that people start to take existent theory on audience and try to manipulate that theory to understand this kind of behaviour. But this kind of behaviour is not the same sort of thing. An internet user in China person A might well be using the internet for a particular thing. Person B might be gaming. Person 3 might be not using a computer at all. They might be using their phone to access WeChat, etc., etc., etc. The diversity of use is not very handy when we consider theory that's been put forward. So these kinds of phenomena are now really, really problematic for us. Audience research really began in the 20s and 30s. The big, you would have read this in William's chapter, it was the first instance where media theorists actually conducted systematic research into a media phenomena, where people like Theodore Adorno would go and research what people were doing with regards to media, what they were listening to, why they were listening to. 1930s, no such thing as television. Television didn't really begin until 1936, and nobody could afford it anyway. First televisions in the United Kingdom, you had to live within a roughly 10 to 15 mile radius of Alexandra Palace in North London. That was where the first signals were broadcast from. The big mast that they use is still at Alexandra Palace. It's huge, you can see it from miles around. But you could only pick up in that vicinity from 1936 to basically the start of World War II. And in World War II, television was shut down in the UK. There were no broadcasts at all. It only restarted about 1948. And again, it took a big cultural moment for television to break through. It was the coronation of the Queen, who just passed away in 1953, which prompted many, many people to adopt television as a medium, because people genuinely wanted to see this. And for the first time ever, that was a possibility, that you could actually watch what happened when the Queen became the new Queen. And so television boomed from there. But when Adorno started this kind of research, it was all about radio. Radio was the mass medium at the time. Radio becomes popular after the First World War, so from 1918 onwards, and in particular in the United States in 1921 and 22, radio boomed as a medium. It was very cheap, it was very available. Companies were set up like RCA to broadcast nationally in the United States. For the first time ever, you had a broadcast medium available to all, sending signals electronically so everyone could listen in real time to the same thing. And you start to get the emergence of this kind of audience. And you might think, well, what about cinema at that time? Well, cinema actually at that time was developing about the same pace as the radio. You don't really see mass cinema audiences of the kind that we got in the 20th century till the end of the 20s. Cinema at that point was still quite basic in the sort of at the end of the First World War. You did have long-form film, some long-form films, but not very many. They were mostly short. They were mostly not very interesting, etc. So at the same time as radio came along, cinema started to develop mass audience as well. But media theorists found radio more interesting because it was centered in the home. Now, here's a question. Hands up if you don't have a television at home. No? Everyone's got a TV. Usually there's like one person who sticks their hand up. What do you think the question is that I ask that person if you don't have a TV at home?
Why not?
Why not?
Why do what
I don't
else
give a
do you
shit, but why
use?
not?
Do you have internet?
Okay?
What else do you use?
No. I ask them, what does their furniture point towards?
如果看 TV，
If you don't have a TV, what are you looking at?
你有
How do you organise your furniture without TV?
你有 film
Digital
devices.
Well,
So who's just talking now? Sorry, I'm getting... My ADHD is raging and I can't concentrate. Who's offering an answer?
Like digital devices that
Maybe. People do say that, yeah, you use digital devices instead. But the point I'm trying to make here is that our lives are spatially organised by the media that we have at home. We actually organise our existence around being presented with particular media forms, like in this room right now. You're all focused in a particular direction. You might have a screen in front of you, but you've been spatially organised to look at that screen over there. Interestingly, you're not any longer organised to look at me. When I was a student, rooms were designed usually in a curved way, rather than in this straight way, so that you were always focusing on the person in the middle, and not at a screen. But now things have been reorganised around screens. We've acknowledged in education that that's more important than this. What Adorno was interested in here is how not just life was spatially organised, but how life, and in particular family life, was organised around media. That broadcasting gave family life a structure which hadn't existed previously. People would all congregate around the radio at certain times to fulfill particular family needs. The children and the parents would sit together to listen to a particular program. This gave focus to family activities, but it's an entirely mediated focus. And this led to interesting spin-outs from Adorno's original research. The focus of audience research was basically on what do people understand by these broadcasts and what do people get out of this kind of behaviour. What is the purpose of this for individuals? And the theories that emerge from it basically follow this kind of theoretical position. So it's called a linear model of communication, where you have a sender of a message, a medium which carries that message, and a receiver of that message. The medium in Adorno's case was the radio. He was looking exclusively at how the radio acted as a conduit to communication. So somebody sends a message, mediated through the radio, to be received by a listener. You can take the word medium out and shove any other piece of medium in there, and that model holds true. We have information, it is transmitted in a particular way, and then we receive it and do what we want with it. Listen to it, enjoy it, don't enjoy it. Can anyone tell me what's wrong with this? Just from the outset. Does anyone have a problem here?
It's no longer the way that we can do things, because now anyone can kind of be a disseminator.
Okay. So do you think there needs to be a loop,
Yeah,
perhaps, so the receiver goes back to being the sender?
like people can all reply on those.
Sure. Yeah, I think Ash's point is a really good one. Note the arrows. It is entirely, as the word says, linear. It's one way. And actually, in contemporary society, the receiver of a message usually transmits another message back. So we need some kind of feedback loop built into this system.
It also assumes that everyone's going to take in and interpret something the same way, but there could be multiple lines coming out of the medium because everyone sees it differently.
I couldn't put it better myself. Fantastic. The assumption being made here is that receiver is a uniform principle, that we're all going to receive a message in the same way. But actually, we don't. We can be watching the same movie as one another, and you enjoy it, and I don't. And therefore the message that we get from that is going to be completely different. But this model doesn't acknowledge any kind of individuation on the point of the receiver. And that's a very, very important point. So these early models of communication, based on a linear principle, are actually really, really problematic. And one way of thinking about that concept is in terms of how simple they make audiences seem. These, if you like, are the canonical theories of audience research. Hypodermic needle theory doesn't exist. Hypodermic, if you having read Will's chapter, you'll have seen in Will's chapter he discusses this, that the hypodermic needle theory that we discuss a lot in media studies and textbooks and so on really isn't a thing at all. But it does describe a particular attitude. The hypodermic needle model describes how people can be literally injected with meaning from media. How dumb have you got to be to do that? How dumb are people who sit there, watch, and then take the message unproblematically? I don't even know anyone who's capable of doing that. I know some really stupid people. You know, I've got family. All my family are morons. But not even they are dumb enough to take in the messages like that and unproblematically do it. Hypodermic needle theory, where the media push a message into the audience, is associated with this phenomenon of brainwashing, that, the problem with the media and the power of the media is that it can control what people think and do. But there's no evidence in any sort of, empirical way that ever happens. That people just sit and say, oh yeah, I watched Batman. I'm definitely not going to Gotham City. It looks really dangerous. I'm going to avoid. Shut up. Nobody actually acts that way. Hypodermic needle theory kind of characterises a particular way of looking at things. The two-step flow model developed out of those early pre-war theories of audience behaviour, these very simplistic ideas about audience can be controlled and brainwashed. So Lazarsfeld and Katz were primarily interested in public relations and advertising. That was their field in many ways. And through their research on that, they discovered, if you like, something which seems quite obvious to me, but they discovered this idea that key respected individuals mediate the message of the media. Opinion leaders are very important in what we accept and what we don't accept. So for Lazarsfeld and Katz, it's not quite a linear model. You have, if you like, another part of it. You have a medium, and then you have an opinion leader, which they are mediated also, they appear through the media very often. And if you trust or don't trust that person, then accordingly you will act on the information given. Very interesting in terms of political communication, this theory. You know, it makes a lot of sense in terms of political communication, but it's very, very limited in this idea. I wouldn't get rid of two-step flow theory, because I think in the age of influencer culture, there's something to be said about the idea of there being an opinion leader that people follow. Millions of people around the world follow influencers on Instagram, for example, and that influences their lifestyle choices, what they purchase, how they look, how they conduct themselves. So there is something important about this idea. But we have to be careful how to use it. It certainly doesn't explain all behaviour, which is, you know, really problematic, because if you actually want a theory that explains things, you have to kind of explain everything. And that's the problem with this theory in particular, is that there are lots of things that we consume which we do without reference to an opinion leader. You know, Connor might tell me, oh yeah, you can watch, I should go and watch this movie. Now, I like Connor, but he is not an opinion leader. Do you know what I mean? He's not a public figure of great respect. He might well be one day in the future, you know, you might be in that position. But right now, Ash, if you tell me to watch a movie, I'm going to be like, yeah. But maybe one day I'll be like, holy shit, Ash told me to watch that, yeah, I'm going to do it. You might take that point. Uses and gratifications theory is a much more useful example of these old theories. So this is McQuail and Katz's work. And basically, the important thing here is they change the focus from what people believe through consuming media to asking questions about why people use media. Because the focus of the question that they're asking changes, the kind of theory changes, and the idea about who is an audience changes too. Both the hypodermic needle theory and the two-step flow model both make the really basic assumption that we are kind of dumb. That, you know, we'll either instantly believe anything we're shown in the media, or you shove a pretty face in there and we'll instantly believe that because of the presence of that individual. And we will unproblematically do these things. Uses and gratification theory adds some complexity to this by asking why people use media. And so we're starting to move to what's called an active audience theory. These simple audience theories at the beginning, they present the audience as being passive, that we are passive receivers of information. We do not act in an active fashion. But the uses and gratification theory begins to actually assess humans rightly as active individuals. We do not just watch. Because in the process of watching, we are bringing stuff to the table. We have a history. We have a history and a knowledge of things. And we are always using that knowledge to understand what we are being shown, and then to conceptually, understand the messages themselves embedded into those media texts. We are never just passively watching. We are always bringing it. So just in asking why people use media, there is a radical sea change. The view of audience here, though, is still a little bit problematic, because by asking that question and not really asking everything else, all they're positioning us as is like, we only use media in order to satisfy a particular set of needs. We have no other reasons for using media. That doesn't seem correct to me. I will watch. It doesn't make me happy to watch the news, because what have you got out there? Strike, war, cold, old people dying, You know? It's not a fun time. The news does not bring me joy. But I watch it anyway. Why do I watch the news? When I get up in the morning, why do I put the news on?
Want to see what's happening.
Yeah, I want to be informed, right? I at least want to give the impression that I know what's going on in the world at the moment, that I'm not ignorant of events around me. It's not a great deal of fun watching the news, but I feel I have a responsibility to do that, you know, and I have a responsibility to be informed about these issues. You know, documentaries aren't fun. They're really boring. You know, but I watch them anyway because I want to find out about this thing. Some of them are good, to be fair, but not all the media I consume is a great joke or a great laugh, you know. I go on TikTok and watch things on my For You page which are genuinely annoying. And then I hate bomb the person who's made it because they've pissed me off. Now, do I get anything meaningful out of that? No, except for being blocked. That's what usually occurs. Is it fulfilling something? You know, is it fulfilling me, making me happy? Because that's really what these guys were interested in. Not particularly, kind of make me angry, you know? But I do it anyway because that's a huge thing. That emotion is important. This theory is a little bit too simple to take that kind of information into account. However, I think, again, when we think about contemporary media, uses and gratifications is actually quite interesting. We do all, by and large, use the same platforms as one another, but we follow different things, we have different content. And by asking us just a simple question of why? Why do we follow that person? Why do we subscribe to that channel? Why do we search on that hashtag? It does reveal, in a very simple way, some of the motivations that we have for using platforms and why our experience is individualized. So, if you like, completely useless, a little bit useful, quite useful, in terms of these historic theories. Now, where things get particularly problematic for these old theories, though, is how they are linked to a particular view of the human being itself. And this really revolves around what's called the media effects model. Media effects has a long history. The hypodermic needle theorists of the 1920s were really talking about a media effects model. The idea that media influences behaviour. And the effects model, which emerged in particular in the 1960s, made some very important arguments about how, in particular, children are influenced by the media. Children as being sort of unproblematic, less developed intellectually, more susceptible to copying things that they see. Now, the effects model argues that the mass media contains clear messages which impacts on a passive audience. People may copy the things that they see. So, there's me, watching The Simpsons. Itchy and Scratchy is on. And, you know, they kill one another because that's funny. And what do I do afterwards? I go to the co-op up the road from my house with an axe and a chainsaw and kill everyone in the shop. What's wrong with that picture? No, that sounds alright to me. That sounds a perfectly reasonable set of behaviour. It didn't happen. I have never gone to the co-op and brutally murdered everyone in the shop. I've fancied doing it, but I have restraint. Right? I do not blindly copy the stuff that I see, and even when I was a child, I did not blindly copy things that I saw in the media, with one exception. When I was about 8, I watched the film Rocky. Probably wasn't supposed to watch the film Rocky because it's bad, it's only, but at 8 years old, it was on TV and we watched it. And I watched it with a friend of mine, and afterwards we decided it would be a really good idea if we tried to do boxing in the garden. So off to the garden we went, and we put some things down to make it look like a ring. And I sparked him out first punch. Even to this day, this is like, what, 35 years later, I really regret what happened there. He had a huge black eye, and he kind of hit the back of his head as well, and it was just like, it was really bad, and my mother went absolutely insane. and say like, I was basically grounded for like 3 weeks. I didn't really mean it. We'd been watching the movie, and it's like, in the movie, these guys are hitting each other all the time. And they're fine. Well, maybe not fine, but you know, they didn't fall over. Lesson learned. At an early age, don't copy what you see in movies. So maybe there's something in it. Maybe I was just a moron at 8. I think that's probably more accurate. Now, this work is largely based on the experimental work of the American psychologist Albert Bandura. Does anyone studied Bandura previously? We've got a few hands here. Does anyone want to have a stab at telling me what this is? Yeah, either one of you.
It's basically, it was an adult attacking like a big Bobo doll or something, and then it was showing the child, and then they put the child in that room and wanted to see how he reacted to the Bobo doll. Or something along those lines.
Yeah. Do you have anything to add?
Like they started copying it, but they also had a control group that hadn't watched I think they either didn't watch the clip or they had been shown the adults being nice to the doll, and then they went into the room and they didn't act violently.
Yeah. That pretty much covers it all between the two of you, so thank you, yeah. So, Bandura's experiment in 1961, as you said, a child was shown a videotape of an adult acting in a particular way to what's called a Bobo doll. If you're not familiar with what a Bobo doll is, I mean, there's some images here, but they are quite grainy. This is the original footage from the experiment. And you can watch the experiment on YouTube as well, parts of it as well. Bobo doll is like a triangular, almost, object, usually painted like a clown, but the base of it is completely rounded. So if you knock it, it will always come back up, basically, and it's weighted at the bottom as well. So you push it over, it always springs back upwards. And those things are called Bobo dolls. So, you have a child, and they are shown a video of an adult behaving with the Bobo doll. And as was said, we have a few different experimental conditions, as they're called, in this. In one video, you are shown an adult acting violently towards that doll, picking up things like a hammer, and really going to town on this object. I was going to say this poor object, but it's only an object. You know, maybe I'm going too far with the sympathy. And in that condition, that adult would be rewarded at the end of that action. A second condition showed an adult acting in a violent way towards the doll, and at the end of it, that adult was punished by the experimenter. You shouldn't do that, you know, you're bad. Go and sit in the corner and think about what you've done, or something like that, right? No sweets for you, that kind of punishment. In the control group, you were shown a video where there was no actions towards the doll in any way, shape or form. There was just no activity, basically. And there was another condition where the adult acted quite nicely and played nicely with the doll. And then, after whichever condition that the child who was shown the video was in, they were given the opportunity to go into the room with the same objects that the adults had in there, you know, in the video that they saw. And Bandura observed what children did. And what Bandura found was that if children saw violent behaviour, and that violent behaviour was rewarded, they were likely to copy that violent behaviour. And copy being a very specific word here, it would mean try to imitate exactly the kind of actions that the adult did. So if the adult picked up a hammer and started hitting the doll with it, the child would pick up a hammer and start hitting the doll with it. It wasn't just generalised violence, there was actual mimicry here. So Bandura concluded from this that television that has violent messages in it is a really bad idea for children, because they'll go out and copy this behaviour. And here's where the problems begin. What Bandura should have also noted is that the kids who saw the adult acting nicely to the doll also now acted nicely to the doll. So their modelling wasn't just of violent behaviour, it was also of nice behaviour. So actually it doesn't cut just one way. You know, television could just as much have a positive impact on children as it could a negative impact on children. There's something really, really rotten in Denmark with this whole thing. What is it? I've outlined With the help of my esteemed colleagues, I have outlined this experiment. What's wrong with it?
Well, it's not, the children are not in a natural environment, they're in like an experimental room, so with people watching them as well, they kind of expect to do something. So if you just went in a room and people were just watching you, they kind of expect a reaction from you, something along those lines.
Yeah, 100% right.
It's not very ethically sound.
Well, definitely. One, there's a big problem with ethics. The point you're making here is one around what we call ecological validity. This is not a realistic situation. Children, when they're viewing television or any kind of media, are viewing it in a context. You know, it could be the context of the home, for example, or their room, or at school, or something like that. And in those contexts, there are behavioural norms which people have, and which are taught to us. We are socialised in particular ways to act in ways in those contexts as well. There is no such thing here. If anything, basically you are trying to say that this is an environment where the only acceptable form of behaviour is to act like that. Well, you don't get that in any other place. So this is completely unrealistic in terms of how children actually receive media. What were you going to say, Ash?
I was just going to say that they're showing adults to like kids.
Yeah.
It's like they could have done it if they saw other kids maybe
Mm-hmm.
doing it, because then it kind of, when you see someone in power doing it and you're so young, obviously going to be.
Indeed, yeah. The idea that it's an adult performing this behaviour is also problematic, because children have a specific relationship towards adults in their lives. If it was other children doing it, they might be very unlikely to repeat that kind of behaviour. So, this experimentation is deeply flawed. Basically, the entire media effects debate here is very, very problematic. It makes assumptions about children, but also adults, and about how the world is, but it sees it through a lens of the world is in this very controlled way. It doesn't take into account the massive loads of different sort of social characteristics and behavioural characteristics that we have, and the huge amount of socialisation that goes on, not just from media, but from other sources as well. But unsurprisingly, this has proved to be very, very popular. Now, David Gauntlet is the reading that I've set for this week, and I do all recommend that you read Gauntlet's 10 Problems with the Media Effects Model, because it's really, really useful. It's a very, very well put together critique of this idea. To assert that media violence will bring negative consequences assumes that the medium holds a singular message which will be carried unproblematically to the audience. Now, two of us could watch Itchy and Scratchy. I will laugh and you will be horrified, because you don't see anything funny in a mouse disemboweling a cat. I think it's hilarious watching a mouse disembowel a cat. I think that's very funny. Do you know why? Because it ain't real. It's just a cartoon. It's there for effect. It's there to make me laugh. We all perceive things differently. Even if we broadly agree with the content and we broadly like the content, we will inevitably see things differently. But this debate is even more problematic if we give it some wider context. So, yeah, that's better. Now, going to show you one of my favourite videos of all time.
Did you know that 9 out of 10 kids play video games? But did you also know that video games
that is my favourite YouTube clip of all time, without any doubt.
But you know you forgot.
So the point that these geniuses are making is that the media effects debate, which is what they're directly critiquing here, is absurd. The idea that somebody will simply play Tetris and note that it is a brick-based game and then use the brick for violent purposes is a beautiful delineation of what doesn't happen. I don't know of anyone who lost a game of Tetris and then went out and bricked the person they lost to, and moreover, then urinated over their lifeless corpse afterwards. I don't recall this happening. I've never seen it in the news. The media effects debate retains a certain amount of power. Often people, and if you do gaming with me in year 3, I'll discuss these cases at great length in that module, and you can go on YouTube and watch the lecture that I did on that. But in particular, there are things like high school shootings and so on, where commentators are very quick to try and identify, did this young person who's done this, or this person who's done this, did they play a particular form of video game? Did they play it problematically? Were they addicted to it? Etc., etc. Did those kind of activities influence the behaviour that they showed? So, for example, the Columbine High School massacre of 1999, very quickly, media commentators were very instantly pointing out that the 2 perpetrators of that crime played Doom a great deal. Doom, the sort of seminal classic third-person shooter game from the mid-90s, and Quake, its successor, made by the same company. Media commentary around that was like, these kids were obsessed with Doom, and then they went into a high school and ran around the corridors shooting people. And guess what you do in Doom? You run around corridors, not shooting people, you shoot demons. But it's... We have the villain when we do that. Oh yeah, it was the video game that made them do it. Kind of ignores the fact that one of the perpetrators, Eric Harris, had borderline personality difficulties, had general narcissistic tendencies, and suffered from depression in a major way. And the other perpetrator was actually assessed as having psychotic tendencies and a psychotic personality disorder. You can sweep all that stuff away. The fact that they were bullied for more than a decade, throw that out. The fact that they came from difficult family backgrounds, throw all that stuff out. Not important. It's the game that did it. Because if you have a singular cause for something, it makes it easier for you to explain this horrible action, instead of actually looking at deeply at things and saying, there's a mental health crisis across the world. Is it any surprise that these things happen? What are we going to do about it? Well, then you've got something difficult to deal with. Talking about a video game or a cartoon or a film or something like that, that's easy. Ban the game. That's a much easier thing to do. You say, kids should not be allowed to play these video games. Millions of people play Doom. They didn't go shooting at the place. I played Doom as a kid. I really wanted to go shooting at my school, but I didn't because, the whole thing. Ash.
Wasn't this also argued with James Baldwin?
There was, in the Bulger case in the United Kingdom in 1993, the film that was identified was Child's Play 3. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the Child's Play series. It's like this creepy little doll called Chucky. Yeah, it might ring a bell with some people. Those kids have never seen that film. There was no evidence to suggest they'd ever watched it.
The parents blamed it on that film.
Yes, they
But
did.
it found out that the parents were actually abusing those kids.
Yeah, basically, yeah. So, this debate, its root lies in these audience theories that treat people as simple. An audience theory that treats us as passive and simple has actual real detrimental effects in terms of public discourse, because these crazy ideas proliferate around them. That, unproblematically, we will take in information. Like Albert Bandura's deeply flawed experiment, well, if you don't think of it as deeply flawed, what does it show? Yeah, you show kids violence, they'll be violent. And quite simply, these are far, far too difficult issues for it to be put down to one cause. Violent behaviour does not have a singular cause about it. People who act violently will have myriad reasons for doing that. There are biological reasons, there are genetic reasons, there are issues with socialisation, there are issues with education, there are issues with economics and class, and all these different factors. Just to say, he was playing Grand Theft Auto. Well, maybe he was playing Grand Theft Auto, but there was a whole bunch of other shit going on too, you know? Sorry.
Also, like, it assumes that, like, obviously, again, that assumes it's the only cause. And also, before, like, you had video games or the internet or whatever, people were still, like, children or teenagers were still going around
Absolutely.
being violent. Like,
Yeah, because I'm just about pre-internet, right? So, like, when Windows 95 came out, I was 15. So I do remember a time before the internet, because I'm that old. There was loads of violence. We used to beat the crap out of each other in school on a daily basis, right? All the time, just wailing on each other. You know, they once allowed us to play hockey in PE. Can you imagine? There was like 4 kids ended up in hospital. We only played for them 10 minutes. Well, I'm honest to God, like one kid had a broken leg. Like, there was 2 concussion cases. People were just running about smashing each other in the heads with the sticks. It wasn't the brightest idea of those teachers to basically say, here's a bunch of imbecilic teenagers, let's give them sticks and see what happens. That was a really poor idea, I thought. Anyway, MS-1 was very good. Okay, let's take 5 and then we'll finish up after.